One of the areas that we do a lot of work in at JTA on different projects is working with market research data or surveys. And one of the points that you consistently make is when working with this type of data, it's very different than working with financial data or sales data, which is more transactional. Would love to get your thoughts on what are some of the major differences between working with survey data versus more transactional operational data sets.
Yeah, it's sort of a bit of a pet hate is perhaps too strong a word. Pet peeve of mine, that this kind of market research data can be really tricky. And it gets really tricky when you try and expose it in a dashboard type environment, which I want to do. One of the things that I get frustrated by is if a company has invested a lot of money, and these things are very expensive, in doing a pretty wide-ranging survey.
For sure.
I want to get all of those answers out there to the execs in some kind of beautiful dashboard that they can drill into.
For sure.
Look at different.
Much more digestible than a
But it's
20-page
really
memo.
hard to do because the numbers don't quite add up. They don't behave in the same way that, as you said, financial data does. They're rather odd things. And so you have to sort of do unnatural acts, let's say. The way you actually compose those numbers and put them all together before they hit the dashboard is really tricky to do, and needs a lot of thought and a lot of care. And I can give you some examples of some of the things that the real challenges behind doing that. So I mean, one of the first ones, and it does seem a bit crazy, is the numbers don't add up. If the classic case of, if we're doing some sort of dashboarding example, and all of the sort of people like the Power BI, Microsoft's example is a shop, and you have revenue numbers, and you want to see a dashboard of revenue numbers. You can always add up revenue numbers across different parts of your business, so different geographies, different product lines, different customers. You can cut, and all you do is add up. And it's pretty true to say that all reporting platforms are built to summarize data by adding everything up. The reason why it doesn't work when you're dealing with survey data is, and this goes back to, there's a concept that is called MECE, and consultants like to have their data as MECE. And that's a couple of concepts there. The first one, ME, is mutually exclusive. You go into a shop and your dollar, you buy something in that shop. That dollar cannot be recognized in any other shop. It is, by definition, in that shop. That transaction is completely exclusive to another store in another geo. And you bought a product. It can't get wrapped up with a different product. The same is not true of survey data, where we're dealing with usually respondents. People give their opinions. And often their opinions might cover multiple products. It's very common in a survey to say to somebody responding, okay, so here's 5 products. Can you give us an opinion on these 5 products? It's not the same. You can't then say that respondent is unique only to one product. They actually fall across multiple products. And what goes wrong is with most solutions, when they try and put that into a dashboard, if the dashboard is looking at one particular product, it needs to give that person's opinion. But if it wants to give an image of a view across all of the products, by default, it's going to try and add that opinion up multiple times. But that opinion only still counts once. And it comes down to Boolean logic, not adding things up. Do you remember in school, we used to have those Venn diagrams, where you take those circles.
For sure.
And the math, what you have to do is look at intersections of sets. And so that makes things really quite complicated to get right.
And in terms of some of the implications around not getting that right, what ultimately goes wrong? Is it just misdirection, bias that all of a sudden gets introduced? What are some of the things that can manifest?
So bias is definitely a problem. So let's imagine that we've got some people who gave their opinions on just one or two products, but then you've got people who gave their opinion on a whole bunch of products. If the system starts to add that up erroneously, their opinion is suddenly going to count on the final average a lot more than just because they gave more opinions, and that can't be right. You need to take just one, and that's why the set intersection, you look and say, well, has this respondent given his opinion on any one of these products? Yes, so let's count his or her opinion, but once. And so that's why it comes down to kind of set theory and set operations as opposed to just adding things up. So bias is definitely one of those issues that you know will go wrong.
Interesting. So the starting point that is fundamental to get to that beautiful dashboard is to build the right model to do these calculations and make these adjustments.
Yes, and one of the issues is that the way that fantastic products like Tableau, Power BI, all of these sort of things are built is they're designed really to expect the data to be mutually exclusive, to comply with these NICE rules, and they add up. That's their default sort of behavior, whereas the default behavior needs to be a count of items within intersecting sets. And that's a totally different logic. And there's a lot of ways that you can actually deliver this. You can be try and build some sort of client-server type architecture where the reporting engine takes in the requests of the user, the filters, and then sends that back to an engine which does lots more of those more complex calculations. And the calculations do get more complex when you add in things like weighting, which we could talk about in a minute. That's one way of doing it. But another way of doing it that's actually quite possible to do, it's a lot easier to do, is we pre-calculate all of the possible views that a person might want to see. And that is an explosion of data. So let's suppose we have a survey in, 5 different countries across 10 different products. Suddenly you've got 10 different possible ways of looking at it. But if you want to drill by, say, it might be 5 different age groups, then that 50 number of different views suddenly becomes 500 views, and the whole thing kind of multiplies up across all of the different sort of data cuts. But storage is cheap in computing these days, and it's very easy for us to, if you like, iterate across all of the different views that a management might want to see their data and actually calculate. And it gives us a brilliant opportunity to do something else that I think is very important.
And you mentioned weighting. Can you explain a little bit more about that and how it ties into this?
I can. Weighting is, not all surveys are weighted, but often when you start a survey, you might request people and say, would you be prepared to work with us and give us your feedback and your opinions? And you don't know who's going to come forward. And what if you're doing a multi-country survey and you get the same number of people replying in the States as you do in France? The problem there is the States actually has a lot bigger population than France. And so the fact that they're the same size is not statistically representing what's happening in the real world. So you want to make sure that the people answering your question, just in terms of numbers, is all nicely balanced. The ratios of male respondents to female respondents. Is that actually something that represents what's happening in the real world? in a perfect world, it would all balance. It never does. And we adjust it by just, if you like, boosting certain answers.
Alleviates bias.
And, sort of turning others down. So there's scaling. But of course, what I was saying about all the set interactions. If you imagine that we have to create all these intersections of sets, and then we have to apply weights, and then we have to summarize it, it becomes like the onion. It's such a multiple layers of things that need to be done when we're building dashboards for survey data.
For sure.
That a simple out-of-the-box reporting engine like a Power BI or a Tableau, they can't do that off the bat.
Yeah, it's a great example of sort of thinking through the model, and if you don't get that right, ultimately garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
So much more than just a dashboard.
Yep.
What about the concept of comparability, and how does that play into survey data?
Yeah, this is something where I think survey professionals are very aware of comparability because, of course, the questions might change as a survey is launched, over time. But one of the things I would love to do whenever I'm working with survey data and a client is not just to produce a dashboard that says, well, this is the snapshot, this is what's going on, this is the sentiment, whether it's a product satisfaction or whatever it might be, a compete view. What you want to see is evolution over time. And so comparability and getting the data absolutely comparable wave on wave is vital. And we as data scientists have a big responsibility to work with the question designers.
And what does wave on wave mean? Because that's an
So
interesting
wave
concept.
on wave. So you run a survey and you typically call it a wave, and you get results. And then you might, a year later or 6 months later, repeat. And of course, you're looking for improvements.
Right.
And so a wave-on-wave analysis is actually quite fascinating, because suddenly you might see that your product is actually ranked more highly against the competition in most geos. But what if it's not all? What if there's a country where that's not happening, and why? So actually wave-on-wave analysis becomes incredibly insightful to the executives that are our customers, and is if we can do that, it's very important. And then it allows us to do things like, as I said, the computer can kind of pre-calculate all of the different sort of combinations of filters and information. Incidentally, it can do something very important, which is discard things that are statistically irrelevant, because it might be able to produce an answer for you, but if that answer only came from 2 or 3 respondents, then you really shouldn't trust that answer. But if it comes from a group of 200 respondents, it becomes more trustworthy. And this is another reason why, back to our financial example, you spent $1 in a store, I could come along and spend $1,000, but my $1, my dollars are worth the same as your dollars. Survey data, it's not like that. If you've got very few respondents, you can't trust their opinion because it's not statistically valid. So we filter all of that out. And that's something that really helps. But the other thing we can do, scan through all of the data, and we look for all the wave-on-wave movements. And again, we can actually calculate what is statistically relevant in that data set. And this is something then where the machine can unlock insight. Looking through survey results, an old-fashioned way, you might not hit on a really interesting nugget. But if we can say to the computer, well, show us the top 20 things that have moved since we last ran this survey and are highly statistically relevant because we're seeing a big weight of opinion, a large sample size, tell us about it. And it might be hard to find that insight because it might be just one product in one geo that's used by a certain industry. And so it's pretty hidden, but the computer's going to find that in a second.
It ties back to the notion of your point of having the ability to show evolutions and find the proverbial needle in a haystack.
Yeah. And so that's why, we can really give incredible value to our clients and executives by giving dashboarding solutions that are backed up and powered by survey data, but you can't just do an out-of-the-box install. All these things like problems with MECE data, mutual exclusivity, applying weight, Boolean operations around sets, set intersections, statistical relevance, sample size filtering. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And as I said, my pet peeve, so many data reporting shops simply don't understand these issues and will put that data into a reporting solution where it looks like it's doing something valuable, but if they haven't understood these deep-seated mathematical problems, they are misrepresenting information to their clients.
Most beautiful dashboard in the world, but ultimately all for naught.
Yep.
Brilliant.
That's it.
And in terms of some of the trends that we're seeing on different projects that you'd be very well aware of within the sort of survey world, and a lot of hot topics with different executives and whatnot, is trying to think about large language models, everyone's favorite topic. And it's been interesting to sort of see in these different projects, the notion of understanding a large language model is a great generator of data, if you think about something like ChatGTP, but they also seem to be really good at analyzing data, in particular unstructured data, and being able to classify things like sentiment out of a huge paragraph or a huge response. How is that sort of changing the game, if you will? Is it opening up new data sets that could never really be tapped into before?
Absolutely. I think before, people were somewhat reticent to ask for textual feedback from their survey respondents. The boxes, please can you type a reason or give us some more if you want to give us some more. Because analysing that required human input. So they tend to sort of minimise textual input, preferring numeric answer on a scale of 1 to 10, your satisfaction is something that a computer can deal with. But of course nowadays, the computer is excellent at reading and understanding and getting sentiment and making connections.
Yeah.
Especially imagine if your respondent starts talking about your competitors and competitor products that they might have experienced, and their feeling about how you compare with some of your competitors.
For sure.
The computer's going to be able to scan through and understand all that. And we can then distill that down into something that we can look for categories of feedback and see frequencies. Is that popping up more and more and more? In which case, can we then summarize what that is?
Totally.
And then expose that in a report and say, look, what's coming out of the text, these are the top 5 issues that people are talking about again and again. This one comes up.
And the medium shifts too, because one of the things that we're looking at with a client right now is super interesting, is building a chat interface to actually analyze that data. And all those survey responses are in a vector database, which in a sense becomes its memory. So they can just fire off a question and it's grounded in that source of truth.
Because humans all think slightly differently. Some people are very numeric, some people are visual, some people love to see the chart. We want to see that graph, but not everyone works that way. And actually, having text, say, the ability to put in text and say, which geos has our satisfaction changed the most? France had a big hit, but sort of Italy has gone up fantastically. Just having some sort of different mechanisms for reacting and interacting with the knowledge. Executives are terribly busy people.
Yeah.
So, and yet they spend millions on surveys, and there's a barrier there. They find it hard to ingest all of that data. So my mission is, let's make that absolutely possible. Let's make that really easy to do.
Shift the medium, and to your point, it opens up so much more intelligence that was never available, whether it's comments or voice to text or analyzing social media and whatnot. It's super interesting.
Yeah, I agree. So, very, very interesting. And and highly valuable service line. It's somewhere where we've been doing this for probably about 20 years now.
Absolutely.
Actually, it predates things like Power BI. We started doing it, around building this sort of logic on the SQL databases, but now we deploy all sorts of modern data science languages like Python and interlink Pythons with Power BIs, and we've got a lot more tools, if you like, in our toolbox.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a fun area.
Absolutely. Very interesting. Thank you so much, Johnny. Excited to dive more into this. Great opportunity for an explainer video, perhaps.
I would actually love to do it, because I'm such a geek, and all this stuff about MECE and set intersections. I could just see me doing a explainer video on all of the math behind that. I think I would actually, weirdly, and I'm slightly embarrassed to say this, but I would enjoy that.
No, it's important, I think, because ultimately I think the data laws of gravity that prevail is garbage in, garbage out. So if these things aren't thought through and are kind of left to the wayside, and it's all about the end result and the dashboard, it doesn't really matter. So super valuable. Thank you.
You're very welcome.